Picture this, it is 1944. You're on a sweltering Hollywood movie set. Blinding tungsten lights are just baking the soundstage.
Oh, yeah. It had to be miserably hot in those days with all that gear.
Right. And dozens of seasoned crew members are staring right at you. You are a 19-year-old girl, and, well, this is your first ever screen test. The anxiety is so utterly paralyzing that your head literally begins to visibly shake.
It is, it's the kind of sheer terror where your nervous system just totally hijacks your body. You just can't stop the physical tremors no matter how hard you try to project, like, confidence.
Exactly. And to hide that trembling from the lens, to just keep her head physically still, she forcefully presses her chin down into her collarbone.
Like a physical brace.
Yeah, total survival tactic. To look at her co-star from that bizarre angle, she has to force her eyes to gaze upward from beneath her brow. It was this panicked improvisation, right?
Right.
But that accidental, terrified posture created one of the most famous, smoldering signature expressions in cinema history, a move immortalized simply as the look.
What an incredible irony, honestly. I mean, the defining image of ultimate, unshakable confidence was actually born out of a desperate attempt to mask complete vulnerability.
It really is. And that tension perfectly sets the stage for our deep dive today into the life of Lauren Bacall. If you know her name, you probably picture a classic Hollywood icon.
Or, you think of her as one half of the legendary Boogie and Bacall romance.
Right, but stepping back and looking at the entirety of her life reveals a profoundly different narrative. This isn't just a story about mid-century glamour. It is a masterclass in constant, relentless reinvention.
We are looking at a woman who just refused to be frozen in time. I mean, she outlived the golden age of Hollywood, she outlived her legendary husband by nearly 6 decades, and she built a career that spanned everything from film noir to Broadway to, like, modern animation.
Today we're on a mission to explore exactly how a young girl from the Bronx engineered her own survival in a notoriously ruthless industry, how she seized control of a wildly manufactured public image,
And how she navigated heartbreaking losses without ever playing by anyone else's rules.
Exactly. So let's start at the foundation, long before the Hollywood lights. Because she certainly wasn't born Lauren Bacall.
No, not at all. She was born Betty Joan Peirce in 1924, right in the Bronx. She came from a Jewish family with roots in Romania and Belarus.
And her early life required its own kind of resilience. Her parents divorced when she was just 6 years old, and after that, her father essentially vanished from her life.
Which is incredibly tough for a kid.
Yeah. She was raised by a single mother who, they were incredibly close. Eventually, she dropped the name Peirce and took her mother's Romanian maiden name, Bacall.
But with a twist, right.
Right. Being a theater kid with big dreams, she added an extra L to the end of it so it would rhyme with locale.
That little phonetic adjustment is such a classic sign of someone already thinking about how they present themselves to the world. And speaking of her family tree, there's a fascinating historical footnote here.
Oh, the cousin thing.
Yeah. Through her father's side, she was actually related to Simon Persky, who would later be known to the world as Shimon Peres.
Wait, like the future prime minister and president of Israel?
That's the one. And the wild part is that neither of them knew it while they were growing up on opposite sides of the world. Peres didn't realize they were related until years later when Bacall herself informed him of the connection.
That is just wild. So you have this young Betty Bacall growing up, moving to Brooklyn, going to high school in Manhattan, and she's hustling.
Oh, constantly.
She studies acting for a year, she's working as a theater usher to get close to the stage, and she's living in Greenwich Village, working as a teenage fashion model for department stores.
This is where we see the machinery of serendipity start to really turn, because becoming a star in the 1940s was so often a matter of geographical luck.
Right, being in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. It was about standing in the right room at the exact right moment in front of the right person.
Yeah. And for her, that room was a club in New York called Tony's. A man named Nicholas de Gunsberg spots her there and introduces her to the legendary fashion editor, Diana Vreeland.
Which is a huge connection.
Massive. Vreeland is immediately struck by her, striking unconventional look and puts her on the cover of Harper's Bazaar in March 1943.
And that single magazine cover travels across the country and lands on a coffee table in front of Slim Keith, the wife of the powerful Hollywood director Howard Hawks.
Slim Keith points at the cover and tells her husband, you need to screen test this girl.
Which sets off an incredible chain of events that sounds honestly like a modern administrative comedy of errors.
It really does. Howard Hawks tells his secretary to find out more about her. He just wanted a background check, maybe a phone number.
But the secretary completely misunderstands the instructions.
Completely. Instead of making a few calls, she accidentally issues a cross-country train ticket to Hollywood and mails it to this teenager.
It is a massive blunder, but it literally changes cinematic history.
I mean, it is the 1940s equivalent of your boss asking you to quickly Google a job candidate, and instead you accidentally book them a first-class flight to corporate headquarters.
Yeah, oops, you're hired.
Right. But she gets on that train. She arrives in California, which brings us right to the threshold of her Hollywood transformation. I want to unpack this because the word transformation doesn't quite do justice to the sheer industrial manufacturing process she underwent.
Manufacturing is the exact right word. Howard Hawks signs her to a standard 7-year studio contract for $100 a week.
Which was pretty typical then.
Very typical. But he doesn't just cast her in a movie. He personally takes over the management of her entire persona. He strips away Betty Bacall and renames her Lauren.
And Slim Keese, the wife who found her on the magazine cover, steps in to act as a sort of finishing school instructor. She teaches this teenage girl from the Bronx about high society elegance, style, and manners.
They are basically building a movie star from the ground up, piece by piece.
Yeah, but the most extreme part of this assembly line process was what they did to her voice.
Oh man, Hawks felt her natural speaking voice was far too high-pitched and nasal for the sultry, sophisticated image he was trying to build. He wanted gravitas.
And the method they used to achieve that gravitas sounds like physiological torture. They made her drive out to Mulholland Drive and shout verses of Shakespeare at the top of her lungs for hours, every single day.
Just screaming into the Hollywood hills.
Can you imagine?
It sounds absurd, but there is a brutal physiological logic to it. By consistently shouting for extended periods, she was essentially stressing and creating micro-traumas on her vocal cords.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, and over time, this thickens the cords themselves. Thicker vocal cords vibrate at a lower frequency. They were forcefully dropping her voice into a lower register.
That is wild.
This is a punishing routine, but it resulted in that famous distinctive sound that critics later described as a smoky sexual growl.
So they've engineered the look. They've engineered the voice. And then they put her on the set of the film To Have and Have Not in 1944. This is where she meets Humphrey Bogart.
And the contrast between these two is staggering.
Right. She is 20 years old, acting in her very first movie. She's unusually tall for a leading lady of that era at 5'8.5". She was actually a half-inch taller than Bogart.
And he is 45 years old, a globally established star, and trapped in a notoriously unhappy, turbulent marriage.
But the chemistry on screen is immediate, palpable, and undeniable. And Howard Hawks recognizes this instantly. He actually plays right into it by blurring the lines between reality and fiction.
Which is such a director move.
Totally. In the film, Bacall's character is given the nickname Slim, which is a direct homage to Hawks' own wife who discovered Bacall. Bogart's character is nicknamed Steve, which happened to be Hawks' personal nickname.
So meta. The movie hits theaters and it is a cultural earthquake. Bacall becomes an absolute sensation overnight.
And the studio PR machine goes into overdrive to capitalize on this. There is a surreal moment in February 1945 that perfectly illustrates how studios viewed their stars.
Oh, the piano stunt.
Yes, Bacall is visiting the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Vice President Harry S. Truman is there, playing the piano for a room full of servicemen. The Warner Brothers PR executives literally pick up Lauren Bacall and plop her right on top of the piano while the vice president is playing.
And that image was beamed everywhere. It's a masterclass in studio-era star making.
They just hoisted her up there.
Yeah. The goal wasn't just to promote a film, it was to embed her into the national consciousness. They wanted to position her as a fixture of American culture.
When you realize how heavily manufactured her initial image was literally built by a director trained by his wife and physically hoisted onto pianos by PR men, it makes perfect sense that her next major life phase was defined by a fierce need to seize control of her own career.
Absolutely. The studio system demanded compliance. Actors were essentially indentured servants bound by their contracts.
But Bacall was realizing the immense value of her own brand. After solidifying her status as the ultimate independent femme fatale of film noir with massive hits like The Big Sleep, Dark Passage, and Key Largo, she starts doing the unthinkable.
She starts rejecting scripts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If she didn't like a script, she refused to do it. Consequently, she earned a massive reputation in Hollywood for being difficult. But, let's look at the gender politics of the 1950s here.
It's a classic double standard.
When a male actor like Bogart rejected a script, he was usually praised for his artistic integrity. When a woman in her 20s did it, she was branded as a headache.
Yeah, for a female star under contract to refuse a script wasn't just seen as an artistic disagreement, it was viewed as open rebellion against the men who supposedly made her.
Right.
But Bacall understood the specific alchemy of her appeal. She knew that doing a string of mediocre films would dilute the very mystique that made her valuable.
She simply wasn't going to let them water down the brand she had worked so hard to embody. There is a brilliant anecdote from 1953 that proves how deeply she valued her own worth.
Let's hear it.
She stars in How to Marry a Millionaire alongside Marilyn Monroe and Betty Grable. It is a runaway smash hit. Naturally, Grauman's Chinese Theater invites her to put her handprints and footprints in their famous cement forecourt.
Which, for 99% of actors, is the ultimate validation of having made it.
But she turns them down.
She declines the invitation, and her reasoning is razor sharp. She felt that the theater had started lowering its standards, letting anyone with a decent box office opening put their prints in the cement.
Wow.
More importantly, she felt she hadn't truly, undeniably earned her place among the absolute legends of the business yet.
I love the sheer audacity of that.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't earned it yet, so I'm not doing it. And she didn't just set boundaries with studio executives, she set them politically, too.
It's important to look at the political climate of the time to understand the risks they took.
Right. And as we discuss this, we're just looking at the historical record here without taking sides. But Bacall and Bogart were vocal, staunch liberal Democrats during the intense rise of McCarthyism in the late 1940s.
Yes. The historical record shows they were part of a group of about 80 prominent Hollywood personalities who sent a telegram protesting the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC.
And their stance was that government probing of private political beliefs violated fundamental American democratic principles.
Exactly. In 1947, they even flew to Washington, D.C. as part of the Committee for the First Amendment to protest the hearings directly.
But as the political temperature in the country reached a boiling point, the backlash threatened their careers.
It did. They eventually backed away from the Hollywood 10, with Bogart even writing a magazine article titled, "I'm No Communist," to quell the public outrage.
But it shows they were highly engaged with the world, willing to leverage their massive fame for their principles, even when it was incredibly risky.
And that same defiance and grit she showed in her career and politics is exactly what she had to draw on when her personal life completely shattered.
Yeah. In 1957, Humphrey Bogart dies of esophageal cancer. She is suddenly a widow in her early 30s, left to raise 2 young children alone.
The magnitude of that loss is hard to overstate. I mean, Bogart wasn't just her husband. He was her entry point into the industry, her most famous co-star, and really her anchor.
And grieving while the paparazzi are camped outside your door is an unimaginable pressure cooker. And the press scrutiny only intensified because, shortly after Bogart's death, she enters into a romantic relationship with Frank Sinatra.
Oh, the Hollywood gossip machine loses its collective mind over this.
Totally. According to Bacall's autobiography, the relationship got very serious very fast.
Yeah.
Sinatra actually proposed to her. But then, almost overnight, he abruptly cuts off all contact and dumps her.
Just like that.
Yeah, he was furious because news of the engagement had leaked to the press, and he blamed Bacall for planting the story.
In the ecosystem of the studio era, the control of information was paramount. A leak to the press felt like a profound personal betrayal to someone as protective of his image as Sinatra.
But the real story behind that leak is pure vintage Hollywood drama. Bacall didn't leak it at all.
No, she didn't.
She wrote years later that she was out to dinner with their mutual friend, the legendary Hollywood agent Irving Swifty Lazar. During the evening, they bumped into the notoriously powerful gossip columnist Louella Parsons.
And it was Lazar who casually spilled the beans to Parsons.
Exactly. Sinatra didn't find out the truth of who actually betrayed his trust until years later.
It perfectly illustrates how fragile personal relationships were under the crushing weight of the gossip columnists. I mean, one whispered comment at a restaurant could destroy a marriage proposal.
Following the Sinatra debacle, she eventually meets and marries the esteemed actor Jason Robards in 1961. And the sheer bureaucratic nightmare of trying to marry this man sounds like a dark comedy sketch.
It really does.
They decide they want to get married in Vienna, Austria. They fly all the way there, but the Austrian authorities refuse to issue a marriage license.
Because Robards forgot to bring his official divorce papers from a previous marriage, and Bacall didn't have Bogart's death certificate on her person.
The bureaucratic authorities in Vienna do not care how many movies you've starred in. No paperwork, no wedding.
Right, so they fly back across the world to Las Vegas.
But Vegas rejects them for the exact same missing documentation. Finally, out of sheer desperation, they physically drive across the border to Ensenada, Mexico on the 4th of July, just to find a magistrate who will legally tie the knot.
What a journey.
They had a son together, but the marriage was turbulent and ultimately ended in divorce in 1969, largely due to Robards' severe struggles with alcoholism.
When you look at this decade of her life, grief, public scandal, a chaotic marriage, it would have been so easy for her to retreat.
Or just give up.
Yeah, but instead, she channels all of that turbulent energy into a completely new arena. She leaves Hollywood, moves back to New York, and takes on Broadway.
And we really need to emphasize why this was such a monumental risk. Film acting and stage acting are two entirely different disciplines.
Night day.
In a film noir, you can rely on lighting, tight close-ups, and subtle micro-expressions like the look to convey emotion. If you mess up, you do another take.
Right, but on a Broadway stage, you have to project your voice to the back of a massive theater. You have to sustain an emotional arc for 2 hours without a break. There's nowhere to hide.
Exactly. Taking on Broadway was the ultimate test. It was her way of proving to the world, and perhaps to herself, that she was not just a creation of Howard Hawks' camera angles. She was a formidable, highly trained actor.
And she completely crushed it. In 1970, she wins the Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical for Applause.
Which was a massive undertaking. It was the stage musical adaptation of the classic film All About Eve. And the original star of that film was Bette Davis, who happened to be Bacall's childhood idol.
And there's a great story about that. After one of Bacall's performances, Bette Davis actually comes backstage to her dressing room. Davis looks at her and says, "You're the only one who could have played the part."
Imagine the profound weight of that validation. The idol of your youth, the very woman who inspired you to act while you were ushering in New York theaters, telling you that you are the only worthy successor to her most iconic role.
It cemented her legacy as an artist in her own right.
And she proved it wasn't a fluke by winning her second Tony Award a decade later for Woman of the Year. And this triumphant stage career is what carries us into the remarkable third act of her life.
As we move into the 1990s and 2000s, what is truly astonishing is her adaptability.
Yeah, she didn't retire to a quiet estate. She didn't demand to only play glamorous leading ladies. She kept working, finding entirely new generations of fans.
She possessed a wonderful lack of ego in her later years. She was secure enough in her own legacy that she was willing to play with it, subvert it, and collaborate with younger, unconventional creators.
That willingness to evolve led to a massive career resurgence in 1996 when she starred in the romantic comedy. The Mirror Has Two Faces.
She played Barbra Streisand's incredibly vain, difficult mother.
And at 72 years old, 50 years after she first arrived in Hollywood, she finally receives her very first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress.
And going into the Oscar ceremony that year, the entire industry viewed it as a foregone conclusion. Hollywood loves an overdue narrative, right? It was seen as her moment to finally be crowned by her peers for a lifetime of work.
Everyone was just waiting for her name to be called. But then, in one of the biggest shockers in Oscar history, she loses to Juliette Binoche for The English Patient.
The camera cuts to Bacall, and you can see the profound disappointment. It was a brutal upset.
Though the Academy did eventually try to correct that historical oversight by awarding her an honorary Oscar in 2009. But her reaction to that devastating 1996 loss is so telling, she just went right back to work.
She didn't let the Academy's validation, or lack thereof, define her worth.
And look at the wildly eclectic variety of her final roles. She does heavy, avant-garde European cinema, starring in Lars von Trier's Dogville, alongside Nicole Kidman.
Talk about a shift.
Right? She dives into voice acting, playing the menacing Witch of the Waste in Hayao Miyazaki's brilliant animated film Howl's Moving Castle. She even leans into self-parody, making a cameo as herself on The Sopranos.
Where her character literally gets mugged by Christopher Moltisanti for her celebrity gift bag.
Yes. And the very year she died, she recorded a guest voice spot on Family Guy.
She was having fun. She was working with people who revered her, but she never demanded that they treat her like a delicate museum piece.
She lived an incredibly full, vibrant life right up to the very end. She passed away in August 2014 at the age of 89 after suffering a stroke in her apartment at the Dakota in New York City.
She left behind a massive legacy and an estate valued at $26.6 million, the bulk of which she left to her 3 children.
When you step back and look at the totality of this journey, from the Bronx to Hollywood to Broadway and back, what is the core truth of her story?
I think the most crucial insight is that popular culture often lazily reduces Lauren Bacall to being Humphrey Bogart's glamorous shadow, the girl who taught him how to whistle.
Right.
But the reality is far more compelling. She was a profoundly independent, tough-as-nails New Yorker who outlived her legendary husband by nearly 60 years.
She didn't just survive his passing. She constantly rebuilt her own career from scratch, mastering 3 different mediums: film, television, and the stage, entirely on her own terms.
She was fiercely, unapologetically her own person. There's a quote from a 1996 interview she gave that I think perfectly distills her entire ethos into a few sentences.
What did she say?
She was reflecting on her journey, and she said, "I spent my childhood in New York riding on subways and buses. And you know what you learn if you're a New Yorker? The world doesn't owe you a damn thing."
It's the perfect encapsulation of her grit. No one handed her that career. She fought for every single bit of space she occupied.
She really did.
And I want to leave you, listening right now, with a final thought to mull over. Think way back to the very beginning of this deep dive.
Back to the soundstage.
Exactly. Think back to that terrified 19-year-old girl, sweating under those tungsten lights, inventing the look, just by pressing her chin to her chest to physically hide her shaking.
Yeah, it is a powerful image.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, how often do our greatest strengths, or the very things we become recognized and celebrated for, actually begin as improvised armor to hide our deepest insecurities?
It's a profound question. We often view confidence as an innate trait, but sometimes our defining strengths are just the coping mechanisms we invent when we are the most afraid.
Something to think about the next time you find yourself trying to hide your own shaking.